Welcome to the Ripple Effect by the Alliance. We are committed to raising the frequency of our planet. We'll discuss hot topics, share practical tools and sacred frequencies to reveal the magic in your life. Come laugh, cry, and have fun with us.
Hello and welcome. And at this point in time, Sarah's married. Oh,
Yay!
congratulations. And also, at this point in time, I've probably won a couple of gold medals. I'll be showing off on a future episode.
That's right.
Because I will be competing
putting
in
that
my
out
first
there.
jiu-jitsu tournament in the start of July. So, but what we have done is we pulled a couple of episodes that we really, funny enough, we picked the titles, and as we went into this episode leading us out before we could take a hiatus, and so that Sarah can get married and we could kind of really focus on really giving you the best content, structured content that we can bring to you. We picked an episode called What You Actually Need. And right before we started on this little tidbit coming in, Sarah's like, why don't you go ahead and start, Stacia? And then we started the episode, and it's like, I'm talking. Because we had literally sat there the day that we recorded it, and we didn't know what we were going to do. Yeah. We had no idea. And I was like, well, you know what? Why don't we talk about what people actually need instead of what they feel like they need from others. Mm-hmm. And it was just a really good conversation, because a lot of times we get caught up in these ideas that because someone else is doing it, I've got to do it that way. Yeah. We don't understand that we all have our own ways, and they're all wonderful. And so we're just like, wow, this is a really great topic to really revisit. Yeah. And really kind of get those gears flowing. And, what is it that you want? And where maybe you limiting yourself because you feel like you've got to be doing it the way that someone else is doing it. So I just wanted to kick us off and let you know that we have this wonderful topic to talk about, and I'll hand it over to the ladies to see what they have to say about it. And
and I think it's so fitting too with the changes that are coming up with the podcast, right? We actually sat down and looked at, like, what do we actually need? What does our audience need? What do we need? What do we want to be doing? Instead of just like going through the moment, the rhythm, however you say it, like going through the motions. Yes. And just, we actually are taking time to, like, okay, what do we need, us as the Alliance? What do our audience need? And really listening to that, because it's so easy to keep just going through the motions of things and not paying attention to that. And I think what is the definition of insanity is, like, keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Exactly.
And so it's so beautifully fitting for everything that's going on in our lives with the podcast, and probably with a lot of our listeners too.
Yeah, and what's so interesting, I'm now questioning my sanity. I'm like, I have to listen to all the other episodes and see if I just keep repeating myself over and over again, because everything we said right before we went on hiatus in the last week's episode and this week's episode, it's all the same thing that we said a few months ago. Yeah. And we're going through that process. So it's really I think if our audience can see it, I don't know if it's going to be that clear, but for me, it was crystal clear that, because we keep saying that we will never tell you to do something that we are not willing to go through ourselves, or that we haven't already done that worked for us. And with these two episodes, I was like, well, if that's not an indication that we're walking our walk and walking our talk, and really going through the processes ourselves, I don't know what else. I mean, it was such proof of, wow, we're doing it in our lives. That is how we live our lives. Yeah. Right. We're continuously putting ourselves in uncomfortable positions that bring us fear. And we now know that it's the same cocktail of hormones when you're fearful and when you're excited. So we choose to say it's more excitement into our lives that we're adding, but we're putting ourselves in these uncomfortable positions in order to grow. Because if we don't do it's, I also always say it's by choice or by force, right? So when I kept getting the nudge of, you know what, review what you're doing because the content is great, but there's other things that need to get done. And I kept getting the call and I'm like, yeah, I know, but we're doing so great and we love the content that we're putting out, and and every week we finish our episode, and even when we edit, we're like, oh my God, that's great. But then there were other things that we were missing because you don't know what you don't know. When we started on this journey, there was so many things that we didn't know, so many. And as we've gone through, we're learning. But I think it's time, after 6 months of doing this every week, for us to step it up a notch. So we're ready. We're doing that. We're learning more stuff, because, like I said, we had no idea what we were doing when we decided to do this. We decided to do it, and in 2 days we were doing it. So it's not a matter of decision. We put ourselves in comfortable positions, and we have had episodes that we're like, oh my God, I've cringed at myself and things that we,
Yeah.
but we put ourselves in a vulnerable position, right? And we've been willing to open our hearts, open our lives up to our audience, and share what has worked for us, in the hopes that it will also work for them. But now we have to learn the intricacies of the actual business of doing this podcast, and we're willing to do it. So I find that very exciting, because it's just a new level of growth, and we're pushing ourselves to do better each time, and not just stay comfortable where we are. It's like, once we start getting comfortable, it's like, okay, ladies, time to shake it all up again.
Yeah. Well said, ladies. All right. So we hope you will enjoy the repackaged version of this episode. Let us know what you think in the comments. Share, like, subscribe, all the things that you do. And get ready, because next week we're going to start dropping some fun little teaser, exciting things. And then we have a big reboot coming. So get excited.
Yay!
And enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ripple Effect podcast with myself, Sarah, Stacia, and Hannah. We are the Alliance, and we are so excited that you're here with us. Today, we have a really good topic. I say this every time. Every topic's good, in my opinion. But we're talking about figuring out what works for you, what you actually need, and what you need, not what someone else is doing, not what worked for them, what works for you. So we're going to give you examples and tools that we use. But the idea is figuring out what you need, what works for you. Okay. So I'm going to let Stacia kick it off this time. You look so beautiful. And before we jumped on live, everyone, Stacia is just had this great idea, and I love the way you said it. So I'm going to let you kick it off this time.
Well, thank you so much. Maybe we should talk about how people can figure out what works for them, because sometimes we feel like what works for everyone else is what we should be doing, and then it doesn't work for us. And then that doesn't feel good, because what did I do wrong? And why didn't this work for me? And it really gets the gears going in the wrong direction. So what we want to go into is, how do you figure out how you can move yourself forward in a way that feels good and is really for your highest good? So that is our topic today, and I love it.
Yeah, you said it so well. And the one thing I said too was, it's such a big principle, because it's your everyday life. It's, if you're somebody who's listening and you're an entrepreneur, like I apply this principle to that all the time, right? Just because when I'm like guiding people through like building their businesses and putting systems and structures in place, it's like ultimately it's what works for you. And I like to give people lots of different options because you might be somebody who likes having gonna yellow to 10 papers instead of it all in a neat notebook. But it's like, does it work for you? Is it actually working and functioning? Is there ways that we can streamline it that it will work better? That's where my brain goes. But even, whether you're doing like I'm going in my business brain, guys, but for a little bit here, if you're doing a live versus pre-record, if you're doing a live launch versus evergreen, it's about playing around with it. And I think I know myself when I've taken programs with people and I've done something, it's like, well, they're making all this money doing this thing and I'm following like their blueprint. I go back to when I took one of my first business programs and it was teaching you ideal client avatar, which I'm very hyper against. I hate ideal client avatar. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing this ideal client. Like, but my business wasn't taking off the same way. And it was like, because that worked for her. And it might have worked for 20 other people who took that program, but it wasn't for me. And I had to adapt and figure out, and it took time, and I had to adapt and figure out what worked for me. And it was the same when it came to working out, came to spirituality, the type of meditations we do. And that's why I love Hannah so much, because you're always trying something different with us. Like it's never stagnant. Yeah, we do a period of time where we're like, whether it's 21 days or 3 months or whatever it is that we're focusing on something, but now we're on to like a new thing and you don't get stagnant. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm really rocking at this. I don't know what it's called, the thing that we're doing right now, forgive me, but I know how to do it. And I'm doing it on my own. And I'm really, and I'm seeing how it's having a ripple effect in other areas of my life. And it's like, holy fuck, wow, but I wouldn't have known that if I didn't try it. And I found that worked for me, but it might not work for somebody else. So that's my long-winded rant about it. But Hannah, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that, like introing.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say, and the way well, first of all, the way I ended up teaching meditation was just like, okay, I'm just being led and guided. And I actually listened. Mm. We all have that internal voice that we've learned to quiet.
Yeah. Volume knob.
Because our mind, because our imprints of what we were told conflict sometimes. So our internal voice is usually, unless you're trained or unless you're highly intuitive and you've had a very supportive environment, unless that is the case, usually I have found that the majority of the people, especially at least the people that come work with me, I may be like completely off mark here, but our internal guidance system is saying something different than our mind. And because we have a logical brain, and because in our society, in our Western society, the right brain, which is our creative brain, gets shunned to the side. Like creativity is something that is for artists or for some particular brand of people that can afford the luxury of being creative because they're exuberant, because they're extravagant, because they're crazy, because they're whatever. And people who are highly creative sometimes get labeled. So our left brain kicks in, which is our logical and orderly brain. And so when our intuition perks up and speaks out, the mind goes, oh, be quiet, you're crazy. Or not now, later. And what I call it pressing the snooze button, which is your soul's calling out for you to do something. And you're like, oh, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. And all of a sudden you're 60, 70, 80 years old on your deathbed. And you're like, oh my gosh, if I'd only. but only listen to that voice. So what happens is that voice, when at the beginning might have been loud, starts to get softer and softer and softer until it shuts up, because it's like, what's the point? Every time I speak up, she's just going to say, nah, later, or I'm not interested, or take a hike, or are you crazy, or whatnot. So the voice gets really, really, really soft. So what we have done in our programs is we've literally woken up that voice and turned the volume up. And the more you listen to that voice, the louder it gets. And then it becomes an automatic thing where that voice calls out and you just follow. But until that point happens, it is interesting to see how so many people who have had success at something, whatever it is, decide that whatever they're doing shall work for everybody else. And because it worked for them, they're like, I found the black string. And everybody can follow me because I am going to show you the black string. And once you do what I tell you, you will all be successful and whatnot. And then people go, we follow. I've been one follower. I'm like, okay, let me learn about that, see if that works. Like, it took me 20 years and then a year and a half to finally meditate deeply and know what it was to go deep into a meditation. 20 years. And then a year and a half of this one technique that actually finally worked. Now, it's a true testament to my stubbornness. I just got persistence. But that, for me, led to the way that along with the speed reading part, right? And all the mind thing that I love to work on, led to this system that I've created where we leave the mind out of it and we don't judge it, and things just start to happen very, very quickly because we work on it in a way from the physiological point of view, from the mind body monitoring system, as opposed to stop thinking.
Right. Well, let's dissect that, because you just hit it when you said the non-judgment. And Hannah had us do this judgment diet. Well, she asked us to try to do a judgment diet, because let me tell you, it's really difficult. And I think the first time that we tried to do it, it was 48 hours. It wasn't a very long amount of time. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It's like I kept catching myself judging, not only judging what was happening around me, but judging myself. And it's like, when you judge, you have to start over. And I'm like, how in the hell does anybody do this? It was awful. But, we kept at it though. We kept at it. And it wasn't until I was really willing to give up that judgment that I was finally able to do it. And it took a lot of time, because I think the biggest judgment I had was me. And this topic is perfect to that, because we judge ourselves for not being where somebody else is. And it's like, but that's not me. And I'm not supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be where I'm supposed to be. And so I wanted to just kind of jump into that judgment diet, because that is a really great tool for people to really start noticing where they're judging themselves. Mostly that was my biggest fault, was judging myself. But like, where you're bringing that judgment,
so much time judging everything, right? Yeah. But here's the thing, our mind is wired that way, because as humans we need to label stuff and to be able to catalog it and put it in a box or in our filing system inside our brain.
Yeah. And for me, so like one of the big things I noticed, like when I started like my self-development journey, it started with like gratitude and appreciation. And then
whenever we've done those no judgment diets, and I think I need to go on another one, so this comes up at a perfect time, because I'm like, now I'm hyper aware of things lately. And it was like going back to like the gratitude piece for me, like things that I can look at and be grateful for. And you know what? It's funny, and I didn't even share this with Hannah yet, but one of my things was, okay, go outside and go for a walk every day. And I'm like, well, it's winter. Why do you like for 5 minutes, right? And it's like, no, I hate winter. I don't want to go outside. I want to hibernate. I only go outside if I have to. And it was like, well, how can you like embrace winter? Because I'm like, I want to move somewhere warm. And it's like, well, when you embrace it, then you can, that's when it'll open the doors for you. And I was like, fine. So I was like, yesterday, or was it yesterday, the day before, I went outside, went for my walk. Yeah, yesterday, I guess it was.
Yesterday.
And then I said to my mom, I said, yeah, I went for a walk outside for 5 minutes. I said, you know, Hannah's encouraging me to go for walks because, you know, embrace winter, and then I'll be able to go somewhere warm, and like explaining it all to her. And she's like, well, I'll go for walks with you. And she said, yeah. And she said, she does this thing every year. It's like, I'm not sure the name of the women who do this. Wait, it's coming to me. Oh, shoot. They have a podcast and stuff. Gretchen Rubin. And they do like 23 and 23. So mom will read for 23 minutes a day, supposed to walk for 23 minutes a day, that type of thing, right? Because it's 2023. So she's like, yeah, I want to walk for 23 minutes a day. I'll walk with you. And I'm like, oh my God. So now it's this fun thing I can do with my mom. We can hold each other accountable. We're going to walk. The stop sign's really far away. It's like probably like a 12-minute walk or whatever. So we'll walk there, walk back. And that's our day. So now it'll be even longer for me, Hannah, longer than the 5 minutes. But had I not explored that, I wouldn't have like, you know, figured that out.
Yeah, and
now it's
exponentially
a better thing.
Right. And you went from 5 minutes to 23 minutes.
And I will show it. See, you guys are getting our like live. This is what I would be sharing in our private sessions tonight. But it's like, I had a moment, like the monkey moment, when you told me to go for, I was so mad at you on Monday. I didn't have my camera on, and I was like, fuck her. I'm like, I want to go for
It's cold here, Hannah.
I don't like winter. Let it go. Like, Hannah just doesn't let things go. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I don't like winter. She wouldn't be like, oh, okay, that's fine. Just because I'm like, can I do it on the treadmill? And then it was like, well, you can, but like, this is why I think you should do it outside. And I was so mad at you. And I was like, I shouldn't even have said anything. Just like,
jumped on the fucking treadmill.
But I was really aware of it. Because I was like, I felt it in my body. I'm like, I have to do this. Here I go. I'm going to cry because I was like, whew. I knew when I felt that. And this is how you know if something like this whole topic is something you need. And that is, and to listen to your gut with it, because, I knew when I met that resistance and I wanted to just be like, fuck you, I'm not doing this. That's what I needed, because that's what I do when it's something that's scary or pushes me inside my comfort zone, or I think I don't like it or don't want to do it. That's when I know, okay, I got to embrace this. And so that was, we get off our calls at like midnight. So like the next day I was like, I'm going out. I'm going to go outside. And I originally had an excuse to go outside. My dad needed me to do something. Like, no, this is going to be my time that I go outside for my walk.
Wow. And I told you, go out for 30 seconds.
Yeah. Or like a minute or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm doing the 5. Fuck this. I'm not like, if I'm doing
it. Oh, really? Oh, that's wonderful. Like, yeah, because I said, go for 30 seconds and then go do the rest on the treadmill. But take yourself out and do the part that you hate just for a teeny bit, to just get rid of the fear of it.
Like for a brief second, I was like, oh, I only have to do this for the short time. But then I was like, no, I'm just doing it because I knew I needed to do it. Like my soul needed that. I was like, I got to embrace this. It wasn't where I was like, it wasn't doing it because like, oh, I have to do it because Hannah told me to. It was like, you suggested, and I was like, I listened to my body, and I listened to every part of me that I know. The minute I get mad, I'm like, fuck everybody. And like, okay, now I know I got to listen to this. There's a reason why I'm pushing against this. Because I could have easily stayed complacent, and I could have just said, yeah, no, that sounds good, and just stayed complacent. But I'm not one who stays inside my complacent comfort zone, because there's no expansion there.
Right. And there's a thing, but look at the magic. I mean, this is so wonderful because we talked about how much like we hated winter, right? I was terrified of winter when I moved to New York for the first time. Like I moved, everybody was like, what? You're doing the backward thing. Because I tend to do things like upside down. Like New York people are supposed to move to Florida.
Yeah.
Florida people are not supposed to move to New York. So here we go, moving to New York. I went there originally for the summer, and then my husband loved it and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, let's stay and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, whatnot, let's do it. And the entire time, like we moved there in April, we were there for the summer. And then by the time September came, he's like, let's just move here. It was supposed to be, we were going to have Miami as our base. And every summer we'd go spend 3 months in a different country. And he just loved New York so much. And at that point, I still didn't know the most important word in my language that I've recently come to learn. And it's that word called no. And so everything he said, I was like, okay, let's do it. Okay, yes, okay, yes, okay, yes. But from September through November, the whole 2 months, I was like, what the heck am I going to do in the winter here? I was like horrified, terrified. I had no idea how I was going to get through it. But what I did, and I shared with you, is I love hot chocolate. Well, I love chocolate in pretty much any form. And I decided, well, I'm going to grab a map of the city and start finding hot chocolate places. And whenever I make it out of my house, I will reward myself with a hot chocolate from somewhere to make it something that I'm looking forward to going out to, as opposed to this torture nightmare. And so I found a way to make this thing livable, because I had something to look forward to. I started to love it, and then everything happened. And now look, and the other lady said, I don't want to just say names and pop them, but said, yeah, now you're hiding in Mexico. It's like, no, now I get to come to Mexico during the winter. And if I feel like I can be there, but I don't feel like it, so now I can just be here and be perfectly fine, right? But not because I'm running away or I'm fighting with the winter. Now I have no beef with winter, pretty much.
Yeah. And it was funny because you had said, like, when you were talking about the hot chocolate thing, it was like, oh, that's what worked for you, right? It was like finding the hot chocolate place. And I'm like, I live in the country. What am I going to do? And then now it's like, well, now I get to do it with my mom. And it's like, I get to have those memories of walking, and it makes it so much more fun because we're like best friends. So it's like getting to spend that time with her, looking forward to that, just like you looked forward to going for the hot chocolate. Right. So, yeah.
But also at this point in your life, I think this time that you're going to spend with your mom is going to stay with you forever.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because you're right at that moment where your life is about to change.
Yeah.
So what an incredible opportunity to have these moments with your mom from now until when your life changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and think about it. It's all because you allowed yourself to open up to this new possibility of something else working for you instead of staying with what you knew. And, you know, I don't like winter. I don't like cold. And now it's like, I get to go out with my mom and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And
Stacia, why don't we let you wrap things up, and then I'm sure you have a quote for us too.
you know, we talked about things that will work for you. And I know that sometimes, you know, we talk a lot about meditation, and some people just really feel like they can't meditate because I think that they put a label on the meditation as far as what they feel it needs to be. And my advice would be just take 3 minutes, you know, 3 minutes out of your day to, it's called sitting in peace or sitting in the present, where you can just put a timer on your phone or whatever and just be there with yourself. You know, if there's something that's on your mind, maybe think of a question and then just sit with it. You know, I think we put too much pressure on ourselves that, you know, in order to meditate, I have to, you know, put my feet in a lotus position
And not
and
think
I have
about
to
anything.
float around the room, you know, like, no, you don't need to do that. It's just literally connecting with who you truly are as a soul, and kind of letting all of that outside, all those outside layers just fall away, because there's so much magic that's really waiting for you when you allow it and stop being so resistant to it. So I just want to say that.
I love it.
Quote of the day.
So today, I didn't know what we were going to talk about because I thought, you know, well, I'll have a couple quotes. I'll just write one down. And this seems kind of perfect now. I don't know if you've ever heard of a gentleman named Soren Kierkegaard. He's from the 1800s. Like it's been a minute. But his quote was, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And I thought that was really such good advice. You know, like, we're always getting so hard on ourselves for what we think that we need to have done, where it's like, no, you've got to live in the moment, and you've got to allow yourself to live in that now. So I thought this was kind of a good quote for today.
The boyfriend of a friend of mine used to say, well, it's so much easier looking at life in reverse, which is that thing, right?
Right.
But there's one thing that I would love to add to that, which is, do you ever have you ever been, you know, had a picture taken and in the moment you're like, oh my God, terrible, and you go into your judgment again of yourself or the expectation, or I look like this or like that, and then you look at that picture a year later or 2 years later or 5 years later and you're like, oh my God, I remember that day. I thought I looked so terrible. I'm like, and you look at yourselves like, I didn't look that bad. I actually looked good. Or you look at yourself and you're like, oh, I was so hard on myself. And it's like my dance teacher, one of my dance mentors when I was 19 and an aspiring modern dancer, told me, today's you are the best you're ever going to be. Mm-hmm. Today you're the best you've ever been. This is how you are today. And I learned to be a little bit more forgiving and a little bit happier with myself today, because it's the best I'm going to ever be. Because tomorrow I'm gonna be a day older, a day like closer to my death as the days progress, right? And it's like, today's the best I'm gonna be from that point on. Yeah. And so if you start looking at life from the other end, as opposed from young getting, like, if you start looking at it a little bit backwards, right, in reverse, you can begin to be nicer. And if you remember, oh, when I look back, I look at myself and it's like, oh, I looked great and I thought I looked awful. If we begin to do that now, imagine how much better, how much kinder, how much more loving we can be to ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes. And when we remove the judgment, give ourselves grace, and challenge ourselves to try something new that feels maybe uncomfortable, that maybe pisses us off, but we're willing. But here's the thing, you can be pissed off all you want, but if you give it a chance in spite of it,
Mhm.
you're opening the room for magic to happen in your life, which is exactly what Sarah did. And then Stacia has given herself grace in so many of these situations and has had quantum leaps in her growth,
Yes.
as you know. So everybody, and what's interesting is, you're gonna, first of all, it's so true that you get out of life what you put into it.
Mhm.
But even more, I think it's exponential. You put a little bit and the life just gives you back a ton more. But I also feel that we can all be doing incredible things and doing the meditation and the growth stuff, but we're all going to get out of it what's perfect for us. Like we can be doing the same exercise, like we were doing the judgment diet, and what you got out of it, Sarah, was different that
Yes.
what
Exactly.
Stacia got, because what you needed was what you got, and what Stacia needed was what she got. So I find that life is so wise. It's like our body's natural healing system, right? And I feel that our life has a natural guidance and a natural path and our own destiny and our own path that we're following and our own growth. And we just have to be willing participants,
Yeah.
and life will surprise us and shower us with magic if we just let it.
Yes. I love that. Well, this is our episode, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to The Ripple Effect by The Alliance with Hannah Martinez,
Stacia Stove.
And Sarah Jane Lita. We hope you're now vibing high and ready to create your own ripple.
Drop a comment or email to let us know the ripple effect that you are creating.
Music by our very own Hannah Martinez, and music production by Onel Moulet.
Follow us on Instagram at The Ripple Effect Pod for more high vibration content. Please rate and review us wherever you listen.
Until next time.